I've kind of been diverted a little bit, distracted by going over part 2, part 1 of the ethics and other things, really just to try and establish some groundwork. Now, I'm back in part 3 with this treatment of ambition. Ambition's a big thing for Spinoza, because every time we desire something we have an associated ambition, so ambition is going to feature fairly strongly in our lives. Now, there are really two parts to part 3 of the ethics, and in fact all of the ethics. One is the definitions, and Spinoza is taking a route in all of this where once he's come up with a definition, then all the properties are implied. So he defines human nature as desire, or, well, particularly the desire to persist in our existence. He says the essence of man is the desire to persist in his or her existence. Once you understand that, everything falls out of it. People are going to try and maximize their power in the best way that they can. And that causes problems because there are billions of people all trying to do that. And generally speaking, they will try and maximize their power at the expense of other people and other things. And so we get the behaviors that are outlined in part 3 of the ethics. In reality, part 3 of the ethics is a picture of hell. Spinoza's taking us down into the inner workings of the human being. And there are two ways to look at that. One is to just study it as something that doesn't have anything to do with you, and the other one is to study it and reflect on one's own behavior and drivers. Because it's, as I've said many times, it's only through understanding that we actually gain any power within ourselves. So while this is all always outside and other people do these kind of things, but we don't, then nothing is revealed and there's no understanding built. So let me get on to this first slide, and the picture on this slide I find fairly horrifying. You know, I've been in the world of business, or I was in the world of business for about 30 years, and can honestly say I probably hated every second of it. People striving and climbing over each other. Fortunately, I ended up running my own business, so I was kind of top dog, and I got to treat people badly. So he starts off with this definition of ambition. Ambition is the immoderate desire for honor. Well, he's talking about a particular kind of ambition there. He's talking about ambition where literally we are trying to puff ourselves up, make ourselves look good, look big. In actual fact, everything we do has ambition associated with it. Even cooking a meal has ambition associated with it. It's just that it's a little bit more legitimate and it's harmless. It's not particularly going to harm anybody else if you cook a meal. So he then says, ambition is the desire whereby all the emotions are encouraged. Well, that comes from his definition, because all desires have an end goal, some satisfaction of something. We want food, or we want sex, or we want money, or whatever it is we want. There's a desire associated with it. So there's automatically an ambition. So ambition is the desire whereby all the emotions are encouraged and strengthened, and thus this emotion can scarcely be overcome. It's built into us. It takes takes on varying degrees of unpleasantness. If you meet somebody who's very ambitious in the world of business or academia or any human endeavor where multiple people are involved, you'll find some people that are truly unpleasant because their ambition makes them unpleasant. Anyway, he goes on to say, for as long as man is subject to any desire, he is necessarily subject to this one. And ambition goes throughout pretty much everything we do. Most of us wouldn't like to admit that. But people pleasers, for example, have the ambition to gain power through people liking them. They put a huge amount of energy into trying to befriend or to please people in order that those people would like them and be their friends. It's a flawed strategy. As Gurdjieff said, emotion evokes the opposite in response. If you're all over somebody like a bad rash, they're probably not going to like you all that much. If you're a yes man, we kind of know when somebody's playing that game, and it's not very nice. Anyway, he goes on to say, and this is from the same definition, he says, politeness is a species of ambition. Well, of course it is. We're polite to people because we want them to like us. It's the same with charm. Charm is rabid ambition. As Taleb says, charm is an inoffensive way of causing someone harm, because nobody's going to put that amount of effort into being charming unless there's something they're after that they can't get any other way. And normally what they're after is something that is harmful to the other person. So we're starting to dive down into the things that drive all of us, and some of it's not very pretty. And on this next slide, I'm sorry if you can't read that text properly, but I tried all kinds of colours and that was the best one. So there's a crowd of people, probably at a football match or something, and they, on this side of the stadium, they all have the ambition that everybody should support their team. If there's somebody there who isn't supporting their team, they may not come out alive. So, Proposition 31 in Part 3, he says, this conatus, and the conatus is the life force, the effort we make to survive and survive as well as we can, is conatus to bring it about that everyone should approve of one's loves and hates, is in reality ambition. This is what a huge amount of social intercourse is about. About a week ago, I had visitors, and it was a couple, a man and a woman, and the guy is desperately interested in vintage cars. I have zero interest in vintage cars. And he started talking about some event that he'd been to, and he just would not stop. This went on for about an hour. What is he trying to do? He's trying to get me to like what he likes. It's kind of touching and pathetic at the same time. And my wife said to me afterwards, he was ranting because he wants you to engage with him. Well, I'm not going to engage with him on fucking vintage cars. I have zero interest in vintage cars. And as the saying goes, you either cause pain to yourself or you cause pain to someone else if you don't go along with their insistence that you like what they like. In fact, most of society is about people trying to get you to like what they like or hate what they hate. Most of it you can ignore, but when you're in a social interaction, then, well, it gets a bit difficult. Well, it doesn't get difficult for me, I just walked out in the end. So we see that it is in everyone's nature to strive to bring it about that others should adopt his attitude to life. What is religion? What is politics? What are all these things? What is capitalism? What is communism? It's one group of people trying to persuade another group of people, either through peaceful means or forceful means, that they should adopt their attitude to life. While all strive equally to this end, they equally hinder one another. Nobody wants to hear somebody else's opinion, in truth. It was always said in the Gurdjieff work, nobody wants to listen to anybody else. They don't. In fact, I was taught a handy little trick, which I did actually apply when this guy was talking about his vintage cars. But in the end, I just ran out of patience. But one of the things to do if somebody's ranting or they're just talking and you know they're not really talking at you, they're talking just because they want to express themselves. They don't give a shit about whether you're interested in what they're talking about or not. The trick was to listen to the noise, but to try not to listen to the words. And that's a very powerful thing to do, and it's very useful at times. Anyway, yeah, so, and while all strive equally to this end, they equally hinder one another. And in all seeking the praise or love of all, they provoke mutual dislike. It's the chimps' tea party. I shouldn't laugh really, because this is a cause of a great deal of suffering and a great deal of friction. This ambition that people should like what we like and dislike what we dislike. Dreadful, really. Anyway, here's the next slide, which is even more of a shocker. This is where I lose half of my subscribers. What Spinoza says here is, well, it's not just this actually, other things as well, was the hardest thing I found to accept, the hardest thing I could accept out of Spinoza. Anyway, he says, we therefore see that human nature is in general so constituted that men pity the unfortunate and envy the fortunate. Well, that's fairly straightforward. That's what's that is what happens. So it always amuses me when I hear people ranting about the bankers. You know, the bankers have this license just to take money. They make bets. If they win, they keep the money, and if they lose, they get the taxpayer to pay for it. Yeah, wonderful setup. Anyway, people rant about this. At the bottom of all of that is envy. Put nearly all of those people who complain about it in the position of a banker, and they would do exactly the same. So anyway, we pity the unfortunate and envy the fortunate. In the latter case, with a hatred proportionate to the love of what they think the other possesses. When somebody is envious, when somebody's ranting about something that they think is unjust, or somebody shouldn't have something that they've got or whatever, you know that they really want it. Anyway, here's the stinger. Furthermore, we see that from the same property of human nature, from which it follows that men are compassionate, it likewise follows that they are prone to envy and ambition. Shock horror. Spinoza is saying that compassion is driven by the same engine as envy and hatred, or envy and ambition, he calls it that. Well, why is that the case? Well, it's the case because when I cover compassion and pity, as I will do in a separate podcast, you will see that what we're doing in that situation is we are essentially identifying with an image of something, and our body identifies with that image. Compassion and pity are in the body, they're not in the mind. There's really no such thing as a compassionate person. This is hard to accept. You know, I always had the vanity that I was a kind person. Now I see the truth of what Spinoza is saying here, and it was very hard for me to swallow. So, if we are prone to these images of things, to the images that the body adopts, because this is in the body, then we're going to be prone not only to compassion and pity, but we're going to be prone to envy and ambition as well. It's the same driver. Just that in one situation we see somebody else who's unfortunate and we identify with that, or we see somebody else who's got lots of stuff we want and we identify with that as well. It's the same driver. This is very Gurdjieffian. When you get into the real Gurdjieff work, that's a shocker as well. Because all the things that you think within you that are, or that are within you that are noble or valiant or whatever, are nothing of the kind. They're all really just self-preservation that is projected onto the outside world. Anyway, there's another little quote here. But in reality, avarice, ambition, lust, etc. are kinds of madness, although they are not accounted as diseases. Well, clearly they should be. Anyway, I'm going to finish this on another little shocker from Spinoza. Spinoza was no great admirer of the church. And in the Theological Political Treatise, fairly near the beginning, he takes a real swipe at the clergy. And he says, for as soon as the church's true function began to be thus distorted, every worthless fellow, poor priests, worthless fellows, every worthless fellow felt an intense desire to enter holy orders, an eagerness to spread abroad God's religion degenerated into base avarice and ambition. I happen to know, just because I happen to know, I'm not going to go into details, of the the clergy and the priests and so on. They're just like anybody else. They're full of ambition. Someone who's a priest wants to become an abbot, or somebody who's a vicar, or whatever you call them in your country. A vicar wants to become a bishop, and so on and so forth. A bishop's life is a very nice life. Why not have ambitions for it? So there we are. Ambition is worth looking at. Again, when we do this to ourselves, we don't judge it, we just see it. So do I have ambitions making these podcasts? Of course I do. I want people to listen to it and find something interesting in it. Anyway, that's ambition. We'll be diving a lot more into the emotions, and I may even come back to ambition at some point. It's such a big thing.